Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and today we've got a very special show. We are going to do a show on the band KIX and compare two albums, Midnight Dynamite from 1985 and Blow My Fuse from 1988. So got John the Music Nut from the Contrarians and my music corner, and I've got Steve Deluxe from Rock and Metal Invasion. How are you, gents?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Peter.
Doing well, Peter. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. So what we'll do is we'll start off by talking about our first encounters with the band KIX, what we liked, what we didn't like, and then we'll spotlight a couple of songs from each album, and at the end of the show, we'll provide our summation of what our preferred album is. So I might throw to you, John the Music Nut. Can you tell us about your first encounter with KIX?
Okay, thanks so much, Peter. Great to be here. When I was growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania, they played KIX on the local radio stations. We heard Yeah, Yeah, Yeah from the debut fairly often, but when they play them late night after 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that because they were, if it was local bands, they would play them later, something that was off the radar. They play those songs later at night. And then later on, when the Cool Kids album came out in 83, you heard Cool Kids at that same time of the day, and you'd hear Body Talk as well. So they played this area quite a bit in the mid 80s before they really broke open with Blow My Fuse. But I was younger. In 85, I would have been 14. So I wasn't old enough to drive, let alone go to clubs. So I never caught them live until the 2010s. But they've always played this area a lot. We're only about 3 hours and 15 minutes from Baltimore, Maryland, which is where they're based out of. So they played PA quite a bit. They played a lot of the clubs in this area, a lot when they were coming up. And once they broke open with Blow My Fuse, you heard Cold Blood and Don't Close Your Eyes pretty heavy. So fortunately, I had heard KIX before I heard Rat, before I heard Motley Crue, just because they were so close to us in proximity. So it was pretty cool.
Okay, thanks, John. And what about you, Steve? What was your first encounter with the band KIX?
Well, it's pretty much like a lot of the other ones we've talked about on your channel, Peter. It's just a case of me just going to a record shop, just going through the racks there and coming across this album here and looking at it and thinking, oh yeah, that looks like it could be, kind of rocking. It's, called Blow My Fuse. And look at the back and the guys, all got long hair. So, it's just another blind buy for me, which is pretty much how I used to buy records back in the day. KIX weren't being played on the radio, so it's just, this looks like my kind of music, so let's check it out. So yeah, that's pretty much it, really. And we're going to get into that album, so I won't. I'll talk about my feelings about the album later. But yeah, that's my first discovery of KIX that we took this time, and put on the record player.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Similar experience with me, just blind buys. I think it was maybe Midnight Dynamite. I went the other way around, and I actually purchased it through the Rock Candy Remaster series because they are a wonderful retrospective label where they get all these old albums and remaster them and do a reissue. Great linear notes. And I did Midnight Dynamite, was very impressed, and then went on to Blow My Fuse. But I just remember in the day seeing the name KIX in lots of, when I was reading in Kerrang magazine or Hit Parade or whatever those magazines were, they would always do little articles about KIX, and you'd always see the band lineups, and it might be Cinderella, and KIX were like at the opening act in a three-way band concert. So I almost came very close to KIX. I was with my wife going to New York, and I'm always looking at gigs to see in New York. and I noticed that KIX were playing, but it was the night I was leaving. So I would have actually seen KIX, just on the basis that I had that familiarity of seeing that band's name in the day and an awareness, but not being familiar with the music. But I would have actually seen them, would have loved to have seen them in concert. But we had to fly out of JFK that night, and I didn't get to see KIX. So that's the thing. All right. So I'll just start off with a little bit of admin just about the KIX story. So they formed in Maryland in 1977, and the classic lineup of KIX is Steve Whiteman on lead vocals, Ronnie Yonkins on guitar, Brian Forsythe on guitar, Donnie Purnell on bass, keyboards, and he's the principal songwriter, and Jimmy Chalfant on drums. So their first two albums, KIX and Cool Kids, were very stylistically different to the two albums we're covering. And in some aspects, they had a little bit of power pop and a bit of a Cheap Trick influence. So their sound did evolve, completely different. So the first album we'll put a spotlight on is Midnight Dynamite from 1985. This was produced by Beau Hill, whose name was really on the rise from doing those wonderful first two Rat albums. And I'll throw it to you, John. Put a spotlight on a song from the Midnight Dynamite album, and we'll just go round robin.
Okay, well, when I saw them, I've seen them 5 times, and they still play our area at Penn's Peak every year, which is about an hour from where I live. And they were hitting this album in 2021 because what they did was they put out a 2-disc version called Midnight Dynamite Relit. And what they did was they remixed and remastered the original disc, and then they put demos on the second disc. Now, I have this on another CD. It's from the Made on CD label, MOCD. You will still see the sound is greatly improved from here. I mean, it's very, the sound is kind of reined in on the Made on CD label. On here, it sounds like they're playing in your living room. But I have that and Blow My Fuse, which I bought these at their shows. You could still get the Blow My Fuse one from their website. I just checked it out before we started the show today. But anyway, the songs we can highlight, Layin' Rubber is an excellent track. Layin' Rubber, when they put this out again in the 2-disc version, they played 5 songs from this album. And Layin' Rubber, whenever they play it live, it goes over like gangbusters. It is just a fantastic rock song. It's very fast-paced, excellent track. It's almost like got a cheer chant in there after the chorus, which is really cool. It's just very high energy, excellent performances by the entire band. It's a great rock and roll song. And the thing about KIX is, I mean, they might get lumped in with hair metal. To me, they're just great rock and roll. They do have a bit of an ACDC bent, but you see Steve Whiteman, I mean, he is energy personified even to this day. One of the great frontmen in rock, in my opinion, still. I mean, so much energy. He's still dancing out there and really getting the crowd into it. Awesome frontman. But Layin' Rubber is a great track off Midnight Dynamite. It's one of my favorites.
Great start. And that's a wonderful track. More about that shortly. Steve, what's your first track that you'd like to spotlight?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the track before Layin' Rubber, which is called Bang Bang Balls of Fire. Yeah, for me, it's probably my favorite song off the album. So this album's produced by Beau Hill, and it's probably the only song on the album that reminds me just a little bit of Rat. I think it's that Beau Hill production. It just that riff at the start there, just a little bit. I can imagine that on a Rat album. But otherwise, like John said, they're more ACDC type. They're more of an ACDC type of band. yeah, just a really nice riff on that one. Just like a lot of their songs, super catchy. Like it's in your head straight away. It's just Steve Whiteman, John's talked about as well. Is, his vocals are fantastic. What's interesting too about this song, it's there's a songwriting credit for Kip Winger. So I think he had some association with the main songwriter, Donnie Purnell. So it's interesting. Donnie Purnell is pretty much the guy with as far as songwriting is concerned. So he's pretty much writes all the material. So this song he co-wrote with Kip Winger, and I think they're still buddies because I saw an interview with Kip Winger just a week ago, and he was talking about Donnie Purnell and saying, oh yeah, he's talking about this song that he wrote with him, and he'd like to get back together and do some more songwriting with him. But really good song. Bob Halligan Jr., who's like quite a well-known songwriter, he also has a songwriting credit. And if one thing I noticed when I was looking through the credits on the KIX albums, they often would bring in an outside songwriter. So Donnie Purnell, and then it might be, in this case, it's Kip Winger and Bob Halligan Jr. In other albums, there's been a guy called Taylor Rhodes that has come in to help with songwriting. So they're not against bringing in outside songwriters, but it's quite unusual that the vocalist, so Steve Whiteman, occasionally he gets a credit, but hardly ever has a songwriting credit. So it's a bit unusual. But yeah, anyway, great song. And that'd be my pick off that album.
Good start. Well, I'm going to go with the title track, and that's Midnight Dynamite. The first thing that you hear when this track starts is got those wonderful power chords, and you're really channeling the Malcolm Young feel from ACDC. But the strange thing about this band is it goes in all different directions. When it gets into the chorus, it goes into this wonderfully rich, melodic Def Leppard chorus. And you go, okay, this is different wheelhouse. So the chorus verse, it sort of oscillates between Def Leppard and AC/DC, but it's perfect for the song. And Steve Whiteman, he's part Robert Plant, he's part Aerosmith. He's, when you see him live on those YouTube or on the video clips, he looks like a beanpole. He's quite tall, isn't he, John? He'd be like 6 foot something or other, wouldn't he? He's a very tall gentleman.
He is, and probably about $130. And he's a very thin man.
And he is just a ball of charismatic energy, and you can see that sort of energy coming out in this performance. And I love the dual guitar work between Jonkins and Forsyth. They're just magnificent. They're right in the pocket, and they just really complement each other. So it's really important that the title track of an album's got to be killer, and I think this is a really bit of a killer track. And I'm really interested to see, John, that those other alternative versions, they're definitely on my wish list one day. I will definitely get those expanded versions of Midnight Dynamite and Blow My Fuse, because I'm really interested to see, because I hear that there's some, in respect of the demo versions and alternative versions, because I think the thing that I don't know if it spoils it, but there is a lot of slickness about this album, and I'd be really interesting to hear a little bit more raw and gritty. Maybe just take a little bit of sheen of paint off the production. I don't know. Anyway, that's my first pick, Midnight Dynamite. So, John, what's your next pick?
All right, thank you. Cold Shower. Cold Shower's got this really cool groove. It's got a funk bass line in it from Donnie here, which works very, very well. Great chorus on here, a very simple chorus, but very catchy. Another awesome track on this album. It goes over very well live. Great work from the entire band on here. Steve sings very well on it. This whole album's very, very consistent. Especially on the fast-paced rockers, but this is a slower song. Well, it's like a mid-paced rocker, I would say. But Cold Shower is definitely a highlight on this album.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I think my next one I'm going to go with is Walking Away. So that closes side one, and it's a slower song. Sort of, I guess, the ballad from the album, but it still moves along at a reasonable sort of a pace, and it's not like one of those sort of sappy kind of love song kind of ballads. I'm not a big fan of ballads. It's one of those things you kind of had to put up with, all the slower songs on those hard rock albums from the 80s. They started to work out. You got to have one of those on the album at least. But KIX, I think, did theirs really well, and I think that's a great way to close off the album, and nice change of pace, but still sounds like KIX, and doesn't sound like it's not a sellout or anything like that. You can imagine that this is just a good rock ballad sort of thing. So good song.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, because I think they do the ballads well, because there's a little bit of grit and sneer in the ballads. There's a little bit of bite. It's not saccharine. And there's a particular ballad that I'll probably talk about in Blow My Fuse that really goes down that alley. But you raise a good point. They're a notch above, because some of those power ballads are just so, I think the word you use, John, is sappy. Very too much sappy. You can understand why they were doing it, because it gets radio airplay and the punters go out, they buy the CDs, and that's how it gets a bit of a lift. But look, I'm going to go Laying Rubber. I think that's their highway star. It's I love the call and response. Stop, go. I love it. And it's a masterclass with Steve Whiteman's vocals. It's got great hooks and harmonies. And there's a little bit of, these little synth drum fills. So Beau Hill, he does some of the techniques that he used with Rat, but he does it to complement. He doesn't overpower the production with all the modern tech bells and whistles. And I thought it was really nice. He had this little synth drum fill. I love the guitar scratching, that sort of sound all the way through, using rhythm guitar as a rhythm guitar. And it does a great counterpoint with the stop, go, the call and response. The vocal harmonies on this album are just big, aren't they? It just adds it. And it's a real head scratch that, guys, this album didn't really hit the charts that in a big way in the US or all around the world. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just probably a more provincial hit on the East Coast of America. But this album should have done a lot more than it actually sold. I don't have the actual figures, but I think it was definitely in the lower reaches of the Billboard Top 100. But Laying Rubber, I think that's their highway star. I like it a lot. Sorry, doing a double up, but it is what it is. John,
I can tell you didn't hear much of Midnight Dynamite on the radio here back in '85. You heard the songs off of the debut and Cool Kids more than you did anything off of Midnight Dynamite. You saw a little bit of them on MTV, and no, you didn't hear much about Midnight Dynamite. It was only when they did Blow My Fuse that you heard them a lot again. I can vouch for that. I'd say out of the first 5 albums, this was the one you heard the least on the radio. And when I was saying I heard the songs from the debut and Cool Kids, I heard them on Top 40 radio. I didn't hear them on AOR or anything like that. They would play them on Top 40 radio, and I believe Body Talk was, I don't know if it hit the top 100, but it was like scraping there because it had this new wave sound. And then I believe Nick Gilder wrote it. Nick Gilder, who did Hot Child in the City back in '79, I believe.
Yeah. And considering this album is quite experimental, there's stylistically some different things that, like Cold Shower, which you were talking about, that has that little bit of funk. You think that that would have enough hooks that, okay, maybe we should explore this. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to Now, as for my third song, yeah, it's hard to pick your favorites there. There's a lot of strong tracks. I'm going to go with Scarlet Fever. Scarlet Fever, I think, is the best chorus on the album. That song kicks. I'm surprised this didn't get more airplay. I don't even think they released it as a single, but if they did, I think in '85, when this sound was starting to get into vogue, I think if this got a push, this could have been a hit, in my opinion. This was a very strong track. Again, like I said, the chorus is what really makes the song. And I think back then, that's what you remembered about bands from this genre. You remember those choruses. You remember the chorus from Round and Round, for example. So you remember the choruses from tracks by Motley Crue or Dawkins, like Home Sweet Home. You remember the chorus. It's a simple chorus, but it's very memorable. And but Scarlet Fever's great track. Again, they bring it on here. It's very mid-tempo song, but it rocks like hell. Strong track. Scarlet Fever.
Nice. What about you, Steve? What's your next one?
Yeah, well, so I'm gonna have to steal that one from John as well. Scarlet Fever was going to be my choice. Yeah, it's like John said. Yeah, great song. It is a bit surprising that maybe they didn't think about releasing that one as a single, even maybe as the first single. But I mean, of course, they did a music video for Midnight Dynamite.
Yes.
And that's a strong song too. That's good. I can understand that as well. So. But I think Midnight Dynamite or Scarlet Fever, so they're both the songs that open up each side of the album. I think, yeah, they're really good songs. Yeah, I mean, it's just that chorus again. It's like John said, I don't necessarily always remember how these songs start, but a lot of the songs I read the song title and go, oh yeah, I can sing the chorus straight away, So just really memorable chorus. And yeah, it is a bit surprising that they didn't have more hits because, being able to write a good chorus is often what gives you the hits, It's like, it gets in your head and that's automatically, people think, oh, I like that song because I can sing it in my head and I know the chorus. And, yeah, great song. And, yeah, great way to open up side 2 on that album.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so some of these songs may be under the category of shut up, just get to the chorus.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I'm playing copycat. I'm going to do Cold Shower. I love it. It's funky. It's something a little bit different. And it's stylistically something that was a lot of those other bands of their ilk, because they were put into the hair metal category, were not really covering. They weren't covering ultra blues. I mean, there's some wonderful harmonica playing all the way through. I love it when Stevie gets out the harmonica, and he's pretty good. And I love it when they use these different rhythms, with the bottom end. They throw a little bit of funk, and it's not just straightforward 4 on the floor type rock and roll. So Cold Shower experiments with funk. And, Steve Whiteman's vocals, he's growling, he's preening, and, you've got the wonderful guitar play of the 2 guitarists with Ronnie and Brian, and those wonderful subtle key changes where you think the song's going in this direction, it goes something completely different. So
true. And you can look this up on the internet that Bret Michaels took his showmanship from Steve Whiteman.
Absolutely. I was going to raise that. You have stolen my topic, but I'm happy to cover that. You look at both of them, very similar.
Yes.
How he wheels the microphone around the stage, how he maneuvers around the stage.
Yes.
Definitely.
The difference is Steve Whiteman's still doing it.
That's true.
He's still doing it.
As I said, I saw a show on YouTube, which was their show live in Maryland, I think in the last 10 years. And vocally, he has not lost a beat. He sounds wonderful. He's still got the tone, still got the range, and a lot of energy. And he would be in his late 60s. I'm not sure of his age, but yeah, he is. Yeah, absolutely got a lot of energy. All right, lads, we'll go into Blow My Fuse. So this was a bit more of a commercially successful album. It went to number 46. You might say, well, that's a bit low, but it did attain platinum status, and it was off the back of the power ballad that was a huge hit, Don't Close Your Eyes, which went to number 11. So that was the hit that propelled this album to platinum status. This was produced by Tom Werman, Dwayne Barron, and John Purdell. And Bob Halligan Jr. was brought in as a songwriter, and he wrote a lot of the different songs on this album with Donnie, the bass player. So why don't we start off with you, John? Spotlight a song from this album that you'd like to put up in lights.
Okay. No Ring Around Rosie is what rock and roll is all about. To me, this is the best KIX song. It's still one of the best songs of the era. Yeah. It is a fantastic song. To this day, it makes me excited. When I go see them live and they do this, I'm a kid again. It's just over the top, fantastic verse. Excellent chorus, a lot of call and response back and forth. You got that great harmonica playing from Steve. I mean, this is just energy personified. It's just a non-stop, little over 4-minute party that does not let up. I mean, one of the great rock songs of the 80s, in my opinion, and I still feel that way. Love this song to death. No Ring Around Rosie.
It's a great song. Steve, what about you?
Yeah, well, we talked about some of their influences, and I think this album's even more AC/DC influence, or it definitely reminds me of AC/DC a little bit more. I mean, even the album cover, you could imagine this being, it's called Blow My Fuse. I could totally imagine AC/DC up here, But yes. And just the song titles as well, they
blow up your video.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So you're blowing something up, So it's and even the song titles, when you read the song titles, they sound like AC/DC song titles to some degree. But so of course this was my first KIX album, and that I heard, and love it. Like the previous album, for me, side one's where it's at. Lots of great songs, but I'm actually going to highlight for my first song. I'm actually going to highlight a track that's on side 2, and it's the title track, "Blow My Fuse." And this is probably the most AC/DC inspired song I think on it. The way it starts off with the riff at the start there, and then Steve Whiteman comes in on it, and it builds, and then like usual with KIX, that big chorus. And it's that kind of chorus that you could imagine it being an AC/DC type chorus, AC/DC song with that chorus, real catchy, and I really love that song. So, but there's so many great songs on this album. The one you just talked about, John, I was going to talk about, but it's okay because there's so many other good ones to talk about. I'm happy to let you have that one. So, Blow My Fuse. That's going to be my one.
Nice. There's so much AC/DC in this album, and I'm not going to talk about this song, but don't tell me that Dirty Boys does not sound like Riff Raff. I played that and I went,
never
Riff
thought
Raff.
That.
Yeah.
I think
that's like it's like a sped up version. So anyway, everyone, great artists, they borrow, steal. That's okay. I like Red Light, Green Light. I think this is a sped up version of AC/DC. It's got the gang vocals, it's got the shredding, the harmonica playing, and midway there's a kind of a tempo change, and it actually swings. It's got a bit of a groove to it.
Yeah.
So it starts off like a 4 on the floor conventional song, but at 2 minutes and 38 seconds, you hear this slight tambourine, and it's got a bit of swing. So I don't think many bands in the hair metal category could actually you could actually say they actually swing and have got a groove to it. So this band sonically, maybe some songs are more subtle than others, actually were trying something different, very experimental. And I think this song, Red Light, Green Light, does it in spades. And frankly, if I wanted to see KIX, I'd love to see them do this song. It's part of their song set, John, isn't it? Red Light, Green Light?
Yeah, they always do it.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, that's my pick. So, John, what's the next one that you'd like to talk about?
The first single off the album, Cold Blood. Yeah, Cold Blood was it. It got a lot of AOR play. It got steady video play on MTV, and it reintroduced me to KIX. Cold Blood is still it's one they always do live, and they turn it into a big sing along, and they between one side of the crowd and the other, you know. So your Cold Blood's an excellent song. Very ACDC riff. I mean, as soon as you hear that opening riff, that I'm like, yep, that's an ACDC riff there. But another cool chorus on this one, like I was saying about Scarlet Fever from Midnight Dynamite. Excellent track. It's aged very well. And that's another thing I could say about KIX's work from these years, I think, is aged better than some of their more popular contemporaries did. These albums still sound
100%. I'll go 10 plus. 110%. It is aged really well. And I think that because the production on this album is not over the top shiny, it doesn't have a lot of those hallmarks of the gated drums or a synth line that's really clunky, because there's nothing worse, you know, in some of these, they might have something that might have been popular in the day, but you can sort of close your eyes and go, oh, 1985.
You're right.
It's the elements of an organic rock and roll album.
Absolutely.
I think I could convince somebody, I could hand this album to somebody and say, hey, it's rock and roll, without giving them a background story that, oh, it's hair metal, it's heavy metal, and, you know, and provide, I could sell it and say, hey, it's just rock and roll. Play it, turn it up loud.
I agree. And I had an experience like that. A friend of mine who knows a lot more, he's no longer with us, but he knew more about music than I ever did. He didn't know this genre very well. Now, I grew up in this genre, and he asked me about KIX. He goes, I always see them playing at Penn Speak. What are they like? I go, well, you got to see them live to know what they're like. And in the meantime, check out these albums.
Yeah.
And they won him over. He's like, yeah, I'm convinced. These guys are great. I mean, and they got the songs. He mentioned the AC/DC analogy and all that, but he said, yeah, these guys bring it. Great band, and they had the songs too.
Just a very quick question before I throw to Steve. You've seen them 5 times. The audience, is it cross-generational, or is it more rusted fans from the day that have just watched them? Do you see any younger folk at the shows? Not too many.
It's mostly people who grew up listening to them. You see like a few, but that's, yeah, it's mostly people who got into them in the 80s, like a little bit, but not too much, not too much of a younger crowd. The ones who you do see that are younger, they're all into it, but they're not too many.
And apparently in Maryland, they were like hometown heroes. So they were like superstars within that province. So you've obviously seen them. You don't live in Maryland, obviously, but do they have what sort of capacity theaters or shows do they fill in your parts?
Penn's Peak is 1,800. They get a good crowd. They don't sell out, but they've played our area so many times that people have seen them dozens of times. So they'll always get, between like 600 or so, 800. A lot of times now, not the last show, because unfortunately Randy ran from Autograph passed on. They'd have Autograph would open for them. I saw Autograph open for them 3 times, and they play an hour, and they would be over. and over with the crowd, and then KIX will come out and then just kick our butts.
Yeah.
But I can tell you though, I did see them in Baltimore. I saw them they play at M3, which is this hard rock festival.
Yes.
They play every year, and they always headline one night. They usually headline the opening night, but this year they're headlining the closing night. They still are hometown heroes. If you ever hear the song Girl Money, and the second verse, they talk about a girl from Baltimore. As soon as they get into the Baltimore crowd, they stop the music and the whole crowd just yells Baltimore. And it's something to see. They are still conquering heroes in Baltimore. And I saw them live. Like I said, I saw them headline at M3 and 8 years ago. They play it every year. And they always go over the best. They always are great. You know, I mean, they would be headlining over, like Queensryche came on before KIX when I saw them. And Queensryche were outstanding too. But KIX came on. Yeah, they were returning heroes.
Well, yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, when I saw them live in the YouTube videos, I don't think they're terribly outside the wheelhouse of the Black Crowes. I can imagine them supporting the Black Crowes because there is something kind of 70s about them. There's a bit of Stonesy feel. There's something that's not uniquely hair metal or that should be sort of linked to a lot of those bands. You could easily market them as like classic rock and roll. And that may be part of the problem. They've been lumped in this subset called hair metal, and that's limited their lifespan. So I'll talk more about that as the show goes on. Steve, over to you. What's your next pick, mate?
Yeah, cool. I would just touching on that a little bit. I think KIX are a little bit like Tesla, or maybe even Badlands. You know, they get lumped into their hair metal bands, but they pretty much just come out on stage with whatever they happen to what they like to wear anyway. You know, they don't really have an image, right? This is them. This is what we wear. This is us. And that with Tesla was very much like that. They're not worried about their hairstyles or anything like that. Yeah, they've got long hair because they just want to have long hair. So they weren't really big. They weren't big image, an image band. It was all about the music. And so yeah, I just think they were one of those bands that got put in that because a lot of those bands did. They got put in the hair metal category, and that's whatever. That has its advantages as well, you know, because that was popular back at the time, and of course it wasn't even called hair metal then. So, but yeah, they, I think almost too until they actually did have a hit. They weren't getting the publicity, or they weren't getting the exposure that on MTV or in those other the other magazines that perhaps the Poisons and the Motley Crues were. But anyway, I'm going to go and talk about so many great songs. I'm going to talk about She Dropped Me the Bomb, and that finishes side one. It's interesting with KIX because, you know, a little bit like ACDC, they're not the kind of band that you necessarily want to analyze their lyrics too much. You know, like, She Dropped Me the Bomb. I did nothing wrong. I don't quite know what the song's about, but it doesn't matter because it's just such a good rocking song, you know. So, so I think again another comparison to AC/DC there is the fact that lyrically maybe there's not a lot happening, you know, there's not a lot of thoughtful lyrics there, but they actually fit the type of music that they're playing, which is just, you know, let's just have a good time and just rock out. Yeah.
I don't think they're the worst lyricists in the genre.
Oh no,
I really think
better than Poison.
Well, sometimes you can have simple lyrics, and as long as it has a synergy and it matches the music, it gets you over the line. So I don't think that I've looked at a couple of their lyrics just in preparation for this show, and by any shape or form, they're not like Gene Simmons bad. And I'm talking about Gene Simmons of KISS. Gene Simmons at his worst, I'm talking about. So I don't think they're, definitely not the worst in that sort of era. I'm going to put a spotlight on their big hit, which is "Don't Close Your Eyes." So sonically, I think this is very much like "Dream On." So you listen to those two songs, and it's definitely in the same wheelhouse. But what I like, it's got grit in it. And the message about very much about anti-suicide is brave and something that was not talked about on popular music at that particular time. And for it, obviously got a lot of heat, got number 11. The video clip was played on MTV. And the thing, I think it's Steve Whiteman's best vocal performance. I think hasn't got that sappy sort of syrupy melody, vocal line. He's actually, you can hear the grit and the fight in his song. The message is, don't give up, persevere. Life's not that bad. And I think message-wise, it's a great song and quite brave for that time. So this is another example of this band where they're doing something that's completely outside the wheelhouse and pushing and experimenting. And that puts them above the pack.
Absolutely. One thing I could say about that track, when you go see them live, a lot of bands play their big hit near the end. They don't. They play that in the middle of the set.
Good on them.
Yeah, they play it in the middle of the set and no one leaves because the people who go to see them know there's a lot of great rock and roll to come. So they always play it around song number 7 or 8, and they always get a great response out of it. And then after that, they just rock you to for the rest of the evening. They don't just wait till the end. So
I like that. I like that a lot, and I think that they're tailoring the song set to what flows better, not to what you expect. So this band, subtly, they're experimental, they're artistically brave and creative, and they're a notch above. And as I said, it's because they've been lumped in this category called hair metal that, unfortunately, it's got that limited lifespan, and a lot of people just dismiss them. Folks, this is a rock and roll band. Just put it in your heads. It's just dirty rock and roll. It's bluesy. It's sleazy. It's got riffs. If you like the Stones, I'd recommend this album. If you like ACDC, I'd recommend this. Anyway, I'll get off the pulpit for a moment. And John, what's your next pick?
Okay, we've talked about how they sound a little like ACDC throughout the show. Now, this is a song I love a lot. Get It While It's Hot. But to me, if you listen to the stretcher, it reminds you of Shake Me by Cinderella.
Yes.
When it begins, in the second part, the second line of the song, you hear the keyboards coming in slowly, playing as a complement to the riff. They go into the first verse, and it's just the riff. And then when they get in the second part of the verse, the bass line comes in. And it's that same stretcher. And then they go into the chorus. The chorus is catchy yet simple and rocks and takes you in. And it's very similar that way, but like Shake Me, it's catchy. I mean, it's very infectious, and it's a great track, and it just brings you right in. I think this whole first side is killer. There's everything on the first side it just brings you in, and it doesn't let up. You're not going to skip anything on the first side. No matter how cynical you may be, you have to admit this first side it just works from top to bottom, and you got a fantastic power ballad in here too, which has that grit into it, and then has that anti-suicide message. But yeah, Get It While It's Hot. Love that song.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs on the album. Love it. Steve.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Get It While It's Hot as well, because we've talked about every song on side 1, and like John was saying, that first side is just every song is killer. You know, I like how track 4 is Don't Close Your Eyes, so it has the ballad there, but then still finishes off with a good rocker at the end. So it's the kind of if I was gonna try and get someone into KIX, I'd say this would be the record I'd put on, and this would be the side I'd put on. And I just think they really got their sound down on this album, and especially the songs on side 1. So yeah, Get It While It's Hot, just another good hard rocking song. Just, you know, following on really from you know, the song that opened the album, and you're just thinking, oh yes, another great song, and it's just and really a good indication of the sound that they were going for on this album. So yeah, ACDC definitely inspired. I mean, it's quite interesting that on this album and on the previous album that they have these ACDC you know, influences, because their first 2 albums don't sound very ACDC at all, really. So it's quite a change. The album, and this is when they really started to have more success. Albums 3 and 4, where they really get those ACDC influences start coming in, and it's the same songwriters, so it's just an interesting change. And it's also interesting too that, you know, I think they were on Atlantic the whole time. So this is, I think, their 4th album on Atlantic, and you know, they haven't had. This is the first album that's really going to be a hit for them. So you know, I guess Atlantic Records kept the faith and paid off in the end. But I can't imagine bands these days being given, you know, four albums, you know, but you know, the record companies having that much patience, you know. But yeah.
And then it took them a long time to get another album out, till Hotwire in 1991, and that was probably a career killer that they took so long. Yeah. So they should have pumped out another album in '89 where you still had a scene. Maybe 1990 in a stretch, but 1991 is when a lot of those bands were starting to be on life support.
Yes. They did put out a live album, I think, in 1990, but you know, it's pretty hard to find actually, and didn't really get pushed very much. But yeah, it's just 1991's too late. After that, yeah, the progress that they'd made on this album, but
yeah, I'm sure you'll find it, Steve.
Well, yeah. I don't think they put it on vinyl, so I'm not.
You're like the heavy metal detective. You'll find
I know.
it, mate.
I do like to have everything, but it's not on vinyl, I don't think. So, you know.
Well, if there's a copy in New Zealand, folks, just message me and I'll put you in touch with Steve. Rightio. I'll just say "Get It While It's Hot" is I was going to put "Get It While It's Hot." No Ring Around Rosie. I've got to select that. That's got, again, it goes back. It's got groove and it's got swing, and it's like Cheap Trick meets Aerosmith. I love that staccato guitar line, the scratch guitar. I mean, maybe they use it a bit too much in this album and the previous, but I love it. It's just so effective, and when he gets at the harmonica, it gives a shiver up your spine. I could imagine this would be like a live highlight. It's rock and roll. It's pure rock and roll. You want to go back to the Stones. You want to go back to those R&B acts of the 60s, the 70s. It's just fits right in, and it's a real head scratch that they were lumped. I'm sorry, I'm obsessing about it a bit, but they've just been lumped in this category where they should have just been like in just marketed as rock and roll. Because honestly, I could see them on a bill with the Black Crowes and bands of that type, and I wouldn't blink an eyelid. Could you see that, John? Like a Black Crowes, you know?
We wouldn't blink an eyelid. That's what I think. I think that the marketing, like, I think most people would question that lineup. We see the similarities, but I think a lot of people are just think of KIX as a hair metal band that if they put them with the Black Crowes, who've always been marketed, and correctly, as a more of a rootsy rock band, and a great one at that, I think people would question, why would you put these two together? But I think people like musicologists, big diehard fans, would see it. They would see how it would work. because they do have that 70s sound to them. There's a lot of 70s into them. It's just great rock and roll. It's just part of it was how they were lumped in, and part of it's the look too, because KIX were, you know, long-haired rock stars, and Black Crowes, they looked more like a Southern band, you know. So yeah, look, I mean, we love it, but I don't know how many other people would go. It's just, again, because of the marketing.
I think things changed in the 80s, because in the 70s and the 60s, like you look at Woodstock and you look at the California Jam, and you had bands that there was a variety of different genres. Some of them were similar. So you could throw an artist like a Dionne Warwick, and then you'd have ELP and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. And then, you know, the Allman Brothers or something. I'm just throwing all these names. So I don't know if that ever existed. And people would sit there patiently and watch these bands and soak it all in. But I think as it got to the 80s, it got more fragmented. And I think the start of this might have been that US Festival. They had a new wave. Perhaps. They had a new wave day.
Mm-hmm.
They had a heavy metal day. And then they had a day of the superheroes, you know, like the David Bowies and U2s, and I don't know what they called that day. And they started to put it into more specific sort of bills. And, you know, if this band came out in the 70s, I think they would have been up there with Aerosmith.
Yes.
To be quite frank, this material is so strong, and they could have played on those types of bills.
I agree with you completely. Things got too homogenized in the 80s. And yes, in the 70s, you could go see a very eclectic show and no one would blink an eye. But in the 80s, it was like, well, they're a hard rock band. They're a progressive rock band. Everything had to be put in boxes.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, like we like a lot of different music. For us, we wouldn't blink an eye to see them with a Black Crowes or a Government Mule or somebody like that. But I think people might still have that mind frame of the 80s, you know, that's, oh, why are these two bands together? But I think people with an open mind or into a lot of different music, they'd be all over it. But how many would there be? You know, it's just what I think. But I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Steve, any thoughts about, you know, do you think to your ears, like you like rock and metal and all that sort of thing, do you think that you could sort of hand these two CDs across to a rock lover and they would lap it up, or it has to be specifically genre?
Yeah.
Somebody who loves the genre.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my collection is a lot of those sort of hair metal type bands. A lot of those bands from the 80s that were called metal even back in the 80s. We're just called heavy metal bands really back in the day. They were just different types of metal. But you know, KIX was in the heavy metal magazines. They were known as a heavy metal band. You know, of course now we'd say they're more just a hard rock band. But you know, they were, and so. There's a number of bands in my collection who I would be like, the only people who are going to like this would be someone who likes hair metal or likes bands like Slaughter and Poison and Motley Crue. If you're like, yeah, but a band like KIX, I can imagine someone who likes just rock in general, likes U2, likes ACDC, likes, you know, like you said, the Black Crowes, the Cult. You know, has a wide variety of different tastes in rock music, would go, yeah, I like this. This is good, you know. They've never been about image. It's just been about the music. You know, Donnie Purnell, the songwriter, he knows how to write a good song. Yeah, he gets people to come in and help him, but there's so many hooks on those songs. And the musicianship and those guys, when they all get together, the sound they create is very much a KIX sound. It's got ACDC influences, but I can't, you know, there's lots of things in my collection where I can go, oh, this sounds like this band, but I can't actually get out of, there's no other record in my collection that sounds like KIX. Do you know what I mean? Like KIX sound like KIX. I've got nothing else that sounds like them. So yeah, I mean, I think, and that's a sign of a good band. You go, what have you got that sounds exactly like this? I've got nothing that sounds exactly like this, because this is KIX.
Yeah. Well, lads, I think they could have been a contender, and it's a bit of a head scratch why Blow My Fuse was not a uber hit. And maybe it was the power ballad, which I've defended. I love it. I think it's a great song, but people sort of just thought of them as that song. And unfortunately, if you look at it on paper, it is a bit of a one-hit wonder, because none of their songs were as successful as that. And even though it went to platinum status, there was no other singles that generated as much heat. But there are so many great songs on this album. You think it would have got some traction. It just needed one more song. And maybe the record company should have, like, I put it down to the Whitesnake 1987. And this is a masterclass of how they got that album to almost diamond status. You start off with an absolute bull terror of a song, Still of the Night. You go to a sort of a more up-tempo power ballad, Here I Go Again, and then you do the love song, Is This Love? 1, 2, 3. Maybe they needed to do something strategically with this album and not put out, Do You Close Your Eyes? Maybe they needed to do one of those other songs, like Red Light, Green Light, or something like that, just to put it out there and really push it hard that this is what we are, and then do you close, Don't Close Your Eyes.
They don't really have that one though that's in between the ballad and the rocker. So it's either just all like rocking or here's the and they don't really have they just usually will have one ballad on the album as well. So I don't think I know what you're saying though about the Whitesnake album.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Because Still of the Night was like the taster. It was like I'm back. And maybe they needed that sort of that pow song to sort of just get that traction. But I think we all agree it should have been much bigger. I regularly play this album, so one more around the grounds. What is your preferred album, John? Is it Midnight Dynamite or is it Blow My Fuse?
It's Blow My Fuse. I would give this a 9, and I'd give Midnight Dynamite an 8, just because that first side is so excellent. The second side's very good. I love Cold Blood. I think Piece of the Pie is very good. Blow My Fuse is excellent. Boomerang and Dirty Boys, they're good. To me, they are clearly the weakest songs on the album, but they're not weak songs, but they're the one. Those songs don't stand up to the rest, so I would give it a 9. Midnight Dynamite doesn't have as many killer tracks on it for me. I mean, it is quite good. It's aged very well, but yeah, I go Blow My Fuse.
Thanks, John. And Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Blow My Fuse. Yeah, that's my favorite KIX album. Like the first KIX album I ever got. And I think it's good that I got this one first. If I'd say got their debut album first, I might have gone, and they're not really my kind of thing, So Cool Kids I don't mind, but again, if I'd picked that up first, I might have gone, it's okay, but I'm in no rush to, get their other albums. But I got this one, and then I did go back and get all their other albums. But that's my favorite. Actually, to be honest, my second favorite's actually the follow-up, Hot Wire. That's very close to Blow My Fuse. It wasn't successful because it's 1991 and this type of music's becoming less popular, but there are some killer songs on this album. But also Midnight Dynamite. Look, I mean, those three albums do sound all quite fairly similar. Those are the three KIX albums that are my go-to albums. And Blow My Fuse is my favorite.
Nice. Well, I'm going to unsurprisingly pick Blow My Fuse. That's the KIX album that's in regular rotation in my household. Although I like Midnight Dynamite, there are a couple of filler tracks. I don't think pound per pound it is as strong as Blow My Fuse, and I think that's the album, if you were going to look at the KIX discography, you would recommend to the casual listener.
Yes.
Thanks, gents. Been a good show. We've covered
Thank
a
you.
wide range of topics. I think we sort of not only spoke about KIX, but I think we spoke about the metal scene in the mid 80s and what was going down and why KIX were part of that sort of scene and how they should have been bigger. So I think we all agree they're a band that should be remembered, and hopefully this little show puts a bit of a spotlight and people can check out KIX. So John the Music Nut, thank you yet again.
Thank you.
So catch John on the Contrarians, My Music Corner, and a few other. Definitely we'll do a show very soon. And Steve Deluxe from Rock and Metal Invasion. Check out his channel. It's wonderful. Lots of great shows, and we're going to be doing a show soon as well. So please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think of KIX. Tell us what you think of these two albums and what your preferred one is. And we'll do another show very soon. Cheers. See ya.
Cheers.